Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming here. My name is Roberto Cardarelli. I work at the IMF, and I'm very pleased to be here today for probably the first seminar of the annual meetings. It's not a coincidence the first seminar of the annual meetings is about Morocco. We're going to discuss today Morocco's quest for a stronger and inclusive growth, which is also the title of a book that we have released today at the IMF. It's a book which contains a few contributions from IMF economists, but also from the authorities, a chapter from Minister Ben Moussa. Thanks a lot. A few chapters from the World Bank colleagues and the Policy Center for the New South. Thanks very much, everybody, for contributing to the book. We have a very packed agenda today, so without further ado, we can start the event, the first session. We're going to have some initial remarks by His Excellency, the head of Moroccan government, Mr. Akanouch. And then there's going to be a chat, a fireside chat, an interview between Madame, the Managing Director of the IMF, Madame Georgieva, Kristalina Georgieva, with Her Excellency, Minister of Finance and Economy of Finance of Morocco, Nadia Fettah, and His Excellency, the Governor, last but not least, of Bank al-Maghrib, Abdelatif Jouari. So I invite the head of the government, of Moroccan government, to give his opening remarks. Thanks a lot.
I'm going to give you some time for you to put on your headset, Mrs. Managing Director. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful.
Madam Managing Director of the IMF, Your Excellencies the Ministers, and Your Excellency the Governor of the Bank of Al-Maghrib, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, please allow me to thank all the participants in this gathering. They have honored us with their presence in Marrakesh, and we thank also all our partners and brotherly countries and nations that expressed their solidarity and compassion with our country following the earthquake that took place on the 8th of September 2023, which left behind it human and material losses in many regions of the kingdom. I would also like to express our great gratitude to the IMF and the Kingdom of Morocco for the trust and for supporting the kingdom, especially after their resolution to maintain the annual meetings of 2023 in Marrakesh and the time that was planned for it. In our meeting in Marrakesh today, we are expressing the great solidarity towards our country in facing the various crises. Very urgent measures were taken logistically and at a humanitarian level, very swiftly following the earthquake based on the instructions of His Excellency, the King of Morocco, and the citizens of Morocco within and without the country have shown a spirit of solidarity where they were ready from the very first hours of the earthquake to provide support and assistance to those who were harmed by the earthquake, and they very swiftly many projects were prepared for reconstruction economically and socially in the regions that had been harmed through an ambitious and full-fledged program to rebuild the damaged houses and the infrastructure in order to reconnect these regions with the rest of the country. And we we are armed through our willingness and our trust and the support, the continuous support that we receive from our partners. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I seize this opportunity of the holding of this meeting to express our great thanks to the Managing Director of the IMF, Mrs. Kristalina Georgieva, and the working team at the IMF for preparing a book on the kingdom which expresses clearly the desire of the kingdom to achieve ambitious goals in order to achieve economic and social development. And throughout the past 20 years, the Morocco, under the leadership of the king, has achieved swift reforms which led to a sustainable and deep change for economic sustainability in kingdom, also maintained its microeconomic balance. Today, kingdom is at a crossroad which is vital in its history, and this is an appropriate time to think about our orientations, and therefore we are called to use it properly. And therefore we would like to have a vision, a strategic vision of the king, which expresses the developmental ambitions and programs which would launch energies and push the country forward towards prosperity. Please allow me here to share with you, Your Excellency, how proud our country is to host the African Football Cup and also the World Cup, Football Cup, in addition to Spain and Portugal in 2030. And that was the piece of news that the king informed his citizens last week, and this explains the dynamism and development that are both continuous in the kingdom. Ladies and gentlemen, we are determined to have a fair society based on solidarity, based on the instructions of the king. We launched since 2021 a series of reforms aiming at strengthening the institutions and social protection in the country, and in view of the importance of the human capital in any reform, we are giving much attention to our health system, our education system, encouraging innovation and research, and the society which allows its citizens to take the lead, especially women and the youth, is a country who has the key to achieve growth. And in this context, the developmental pathway requires not only to be sustainable, and the kingdom is one of the pioneering countries which is working on green energy, and the king has paid a lot of attention to this topic. And today we would like to increase our solar energy, our air energy, wind energy as a main factor in the green hydrogen, which will strengthen our sovereignty in matters of energy. The scarcity of water and also the global warming are some of the strategic national priorities, and hence the kingdom launched innovative projects in order to desalinize water, the seawater, and in order to provide the regions that are suffering from scarcity of water and to benefit from the resources that can be found profusely in other regions. Ladies and gentlemen, the increase in the global warming phenomena and the diseases and the geopolitical crises, the increased or the high prices show the important role that can be carried out by international cooperation, and therefore the multilateral banks are asked more than any time before to support the developing countries and to face the challenges that the global economy is facing and to respond to its needs. Therefore, this adaptation requires that we be more flexible in providing assistance to countries that are facing various kinds of crises, whether by providing financial support or consultation or moral support. Therefore, such adaptation requires that we be more flexible in providing assistance to countries that are facing different kinds of crises, whether by providing consultation or support in order to regain macroeconomic balance. And in this context, the acceptance by the IMF to provide $1,300,000 to the kingdom to strengthen our capacities in facing crises related to the climate. This is a great assistance by you. Thank you, Madam Managing Director of the IMF. Ladies and gentlemen, our world has become more fragile, which requires that we exert our efforts in order to overcome all crises, and hence the annual meetings of the IMF and the World Bank here in Marrakesh would allow us to exchange ideas. And once again, we in the Kingdom of Morocco are very happy and proud to host you, and I'd like to seize this opportunity to renew my thanks to the working group of the IMF and the World Bank for at the various levels of these two institutions and for their continuous work with us at a high efficient rate. Thank you, sir.
Un grand merci, Premier Ministre.
A big thanks to you, Mr. Minister.
Let me first say this to everybody.
Yes.
Salam alaikum. Bonjour. Good morning. To all in the audience, it is really a good book. And I want to thank the Prime Minister for gracing us with a foreword for the book and for being here today. I am very grateful to the Moroccan authorities for your hospitality for our meetings. We all felt for you on September 8th, when late in the evening an earthquake struck. We feel for the families. We know that the solidarity of the Moroccan people is unmatched, from His Majesty to the government to the ordinary citizens. So much has been done to quickly bring the country up and forward. This morning, the Minister and I visited schools in the affected areas. In short 1 month, all kids are back at school. Some moved to schools that have not been affected, some in temporary buildings, some in tents, but all studying. And I can tell you that their smiling faces and their enthusiasm to learn is, to me, the strongest evidence for the bright future of this country. But I would do disservice to the authors if I don't tell you there is a lot of evidence in this book as well. I want to recognize that over the last decades, Morocco has undertaken wide-ranging reforms. And the result is obvious. We have a dynamic economy with a very strong export capacity, vibrant tourism sector, educated youth, and a drive to diversification at par with the ambitions to bring growth even higher. The per capita income in this short period of time since reform started has doubled, real per capita income. So we want to see what next. What have we learned, where we are headed? I want to recognize Minister Ben Moussa, who is one of the authors of the book, and also the minister. He will be on a panel later. And the Center for the New South, our partners, as well as our colleagues at the World Bank and my own team, for bringing something that is not only relevant for Morocco, it is relevant for any country that has the ambition to achieve sustainable, inclusive, dynamic development. I am extremely grateful to the governor and the minister for joining me here for a conversation that, knowing them, I would not have a lot of work to do to keep it going on. So let me first turn to the governor, to the minister. How would you reflect on the impact of the earthquake? For the minister, how do you see the recovery adding actually strength to the economy rather than subtracting from it? And then to the governor, have we calculated the impact on the economy? What is it? People would like to know. Minister.
First, allow me, since it's our first event, to express my thanks for all the solidarity shown after this human tragedy of the earthquake, and for taking this great decision to gather in Marrakech for the annual meetings. Thank you for this. We had the chance, as you saw this morning, to see on the ground what's happening after the earthquake. And under the enlightened leadership of His Majesty the King, there has been a very disciplined organization with all, I would say, the stakeholders in Morocco to relieve and to give assistance to the population. It was priority number 1, 2, and 3. And I think we could deliver, because within 3 or 4 days, we had all the victims, direct victims that were, I would say, all saved, the one who were saved, and our condolences for all the huge losses. But all, I would say, the setup for their safety, for their food, for water, and within a week for schools, and this is very important. So we, under the leadership of His Majesty, we have constant meetings, first to recover for the direct damages, but also to come with a comprehensive, very ambitious plan to also come with solution with these invisible disparities that were in the region. So the story today is to build back better, as you mentioned, build maybe forward, with a plan of almost $12 billion. We will have a chance to give you some, I would say, insight of what's the plan. But this is the idea, is that when we are facing crisis, we also reinvent ourselves for a better future, especially for the youngest.
Yes, this is so very true. I saw only a glimpse of how the country is thinking of building forward rather than just restoring what was there. For example, in the schools we visited, the communities around, our rural communities, some are as far as 40 kilometers from the school. and children have to stay somewhere. Now the thinking is, let's build good conditions for children to have housing on campus. And so, especially for girls, for boys as well, but for girls, for their families to feel comfortable that they continue their studies. This is so, so important. The best memorial Morocco can build for those who lost their lives is to build better and to build for kids as priority. So congratulations for that. Do we have any sense of the cost of this earthquake, Monsieur le Gouverneur?
Merci bien, Madame la Directrice.
Thank you, Madam Managing Director. Well, of course, very quickly, we have followed what the government has undertaken under the leadership of His Majesty. We have set up an assessment cell, and we have worked with the first data available. There is material damage, 60,000 housings destroyed, 1,000 schools, and we also have monuments that were destroyed. And of course, we need to hail the diligence, but also the mastery of what has been done. The helps that were announced for in favor of the victims, but also in terms of housing, as the head of government has mentioned in his speech. But you also mentioned the need to break the isolation of those regions, but also to build the future over the next 5 years. It is a region that is highly tourist-based. 25% of added value for tourism lies here in Marrakesh. They have a role to play, and the fact of maintaining these annual meetings is part of it. But the region is also characterized by agricultural life and mountain life as well. We have compared what happened here in other countries that were struck by earthquakes, and with the assistance of the IMF, we have also reviewed the reports by the World Bank that were produced of late. I cannot give you precise figures, but what we have noted in such circumstances, growth picks up, and in those, as was the case in other countries, each with its specificity, there is a growth recovery. Now, when it comes to macroeconomic balances, the government has announced a 120 billion budget for over the 5 coming years. It's 20% of the GDP, which is the equivalent of what other countries have done. And the balance of payments and the current accounts will also have some impact on imports, and other components will yield a positive outcome. Of course, we need to wait for the figures to better apprehend the impact, but we know that the impact will not be highly negative, but there will be very positive elements as well. We have the solidarity account. So far we have reached 12 billion dirhams, and we need to applaud this national solidarity effort. And I can assure you that when it comes to external solidarity with the physical persons that have subscribed to this fund, you can't imagine the extent of that solidarity when you negotiate with international organizations like the World Bank and the BAD. Morocco still has some interesting leeway. This is what I wanted to say, Madam Managing Director.
Governor, I very much agree that with good strategy and planning, the recovery can inject additional dynamism in the economy. And I also know that one of the reasons Morocco is handling the impact so well is because over the last decades, the foundation of strong institutions and strong policies has been built. You are one of those who built it, so maybe it would be interesting for the audience, certainly for me, what do you think were the most important steps Morocco has taken so it is in a sound position today?
Écoutez, madame.
Well, let's think first about the 80s earthquake. There was an exchange crisis. We have had to reassess the debt. There was a structural adjustment policy with the World Bank and with you, the IMF. So how did we make it? Of course, the structural reforms, I can't mention all of them. All the people here in this room, they know what has been done, the exchange policy, liberalizing of prices, tax policies, and so on and so forth. But 10 years later, in 1993, in January more precisely, Morocco joined the Article 8 of the IMF, enabling convertibility of current operations. We've been able to pay normally our debts, and during that process, Morocco has never defaulted any time. So that's the actual situation. This has enabled Morocco to drive Morocco towards a growth pathward. And then the new reign started. At that time, the human factor was at the core of any policy. So all the reforms have also been based on that. All structural reforms, the head of government just said it. We can mention lots of them, but this would be a very difficult task to mention all of them. But still, there was this commission, Reconciliation and Equity, that dealt with all the historical facts, the education reform, justice reform, the regionalization reform, tax policies reform. So many things, but always putting the human factor at the core of everything. And we have not forgotten the economic development. There were all those infrastructure policies, the overhaul of tax policies, the charter of investments, the private sector being much more involved. The head of a government talked about green hydrogen. So how did we come to do that? Well, I think, to put it simply, with an enlightened leadership, first and foremost, with the implementation, the orderly implementation of reforms. Not everything is perfect, but they're quite orderly. A very proper follow-up and a trustworthy relationship with international organizations. This is how we've been able to sign in 2012 the PLL and the flexible credit line later on. So now there are no conditions in 2023. This is what we have been able to do.
express that Morocco is, for now, and I hope not for longer, the only country on the African continent that is eligible for flexible credit line. So, bravo. Minister, you often talk about the new generation of reforms, the new development path for Morocco. Can you tell us more about that?
First, we are having this new, I would say, agenda of reform because we have this legacy and strong fundamentals. The choice number one is definitely the social state, because every human being, every Moroccan wants education, health, and jobs. So social state is very important for us through health, education, and social protection. Maybe just some numbers. In the social security, for more than 4 or 5 decades, we will have less than 8 million beneficiaries of this social security. In 2022, we finished the year with almost 22 million and something. Why? Because people before this would see going to the social security is some way of paying an additional tax. But today, they see the real benefit. They can go to the public hospital, to the private hospital, whether they have good or bad revenues and have effective public services. So it's not that they're happy to pay any tax or any fees, but at least we have a real commitment of the population to go from informal sector to the formal sector, because the offer of social protection is very strong. And on education, and because you saw how it is a priority for us also in the management of this crisis, we have a very comprehensive strategy of rebuilding a stronger education. It's, of course, a long journey, and all the countries all over the world are struggling with this type of reform. But we are, I would say, responsible with having very clear KPIs. In the 4 coming years, what we want is to drop by 1/3 the dropout of the students. It's, I would say, we are committed, we are dedicated to this. We also want to double the academic know-how of the student. And we want also that the number of students that benefits also from soft skill, from culture, that give them confidence, openness to the world, we double the figures from 25% to come to 50% in public school. And in public school, we will guarantee that there will be a social equality in our country. To fund for this, we need growth. And we have also a strong agenda and portfolio of economic strategies. You know our strategies in industry, in agriculture, but we also need to have the competitiveness, good competitiveness ecosystem for our industries, from the renewable energies to the logistics, to good financial conditions and capital markets, which allows for a rebound of our economy and attracting more foreign investors. And because I'm sitting with the managing director of IMF, we are very careful, Mrs. MD, about having strong macroeconomic fundamentals. We are using carefully the fiscal rules, and we are also reforming the fiscal laws to have clear, I would say, commitments to come back to strong fundamentals in our macroeconomic, because the idea is never let the crisis stop this dynamic of reform for a better future.
Great. It is wisdom. I hope you would communicate broadly when we are with all the ministers and central bank governors, because indeed, after 2 unthinkable shocks, the COVID pandemic, the war, the cost of living crisis that came, there has been a lot of pressure on public budgets to spend, to support households and businesses. And now they have to continue to invest in the future and yet bring back buffers, because we don't know when the next shock is going to be, but we know it will happen. So thank you for the message you conveyed here. And since we are in Marrakesh for the meetings, I would be very interested to hear from you on the first day of the meetings. What are your expectations? What are your expectations from the meetings? And what are your expectations from our institutions? Monsieur le Gouverneur, when we finish the week, how would success look like?
Bien. Peut-être vous...
Well, you're asking me a bit too much, I guess, but I'll try to give you an answer. Well, first of all, we have to think about this planet we're living in. There's this sentence from the General Secretary of the United Nations who said, "We have opened the doors of hell." And I think that this annual meetings in Marrakesh, you should be able to try to close back those doors of hell. And it shouldn't be a matter of financing, but only a question of strength, because that would be so sorry that humans be fighting for their survivals and finding finance as an obstacle. And this is where we really need your support. We know everything you have done during the pandemic in terms of having equitable access to vaccines. We know all the things you've done in the G20 for the debt of the most vulnerable countries. We know that we've been doing in so many fields, but today the stakes are high. It's about our own existence. We're asking a bit more from you, General Manager. Now that we are trying to solve the problem of the Earth, we have also to deal with humans' problems. We have to eliminate poverty, eliminate illiteracy. We have to eliminate the state's sovereign egoism, this geopolitical fragmentation that is gaining grounds day after day. This multilateralism that has brought about some positive results have left so many people behind. Multilateralism with the goodwill of everyone requires more sound public policies, but also an international cooperation that is able to bring back trust for all those developing countries in particular, and more particularly to those young people that we are so much in need. Thank you.
I hope that many are listening to you, because yes, indeed, the stakes are high. The room for error does not exist. It is about the future of humanity. If we miss to act together during this decade, the price our children, our grandchildren would pay is unbearable price. I always tell people, when you're faced with a decision that concerns the well-being of future generations, and these are the decisions we are taking today, please look at the picture of your family, of your kids, of your grandkids. This is what I do. I look at the picture of my grandchildren, and then I know what is the right thing to do. This is a compass. Madam Minister.
Well, I cannot agree more of what you both said about the annual meeting. I'm comfortable and quite sure that under your leadership and one of the president of the World Bank, you will bring together in a, I would say, a responsible conversation the financial world to come with new solutions and peaceful messages. I'm just seizing the occasion just to say that under the enlightened vision of His Majesty, we consider ourselves in Morocco as a honest broker for African continent. It's been 15 years that you haven't been back in Africa, so welcome back to Africa. But it is an important moment to maybe have a look to the needs for the specific needs for the continent. His Excellency, the governor, was saying that Morocco has never defaulted and will never, inshallah. But many other countries in Africa didn't default either. But they are defaulting the future of their youth. They are defaulting making the proper infrastructure investment. So when we are having the conversation of how much financial resources are available, and we need to choose between food security, debt, climate finance, economic, I would say, investment, we need all of them. And this is our, I would say, pledge together, hopefully, to say that the emerging countries need all this, and the future of the growth of the world needs also the growth of Africa.
Yes. I embrace all you have said. We come here for the meetings with focus first. What are the right policies at this time of uncertainty? How we can collectively see better through the fog in front of us. Second, how we can mobilize more resources for vulnerable emerging market economies, for low-income countries. Third, how we can address with higher impact the issue of debt. And last but not least, how can we nurture the solidarity among nations, without which we simply cannot deal with the challenges ahead of us? You, Morocco, you are offering us a lesson of solidarity. You are also amplifying the voice of the continent. And I can say, in my heart of heart, a prosperous 21st century is only possible with prosperous Africa. Here are the young people. In the north is the capital, with aging populations. If we built a bridge for capital to travel where it would make a difference, Africa would do well, the world would do well.
Bravo. 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 Bravo.
Merci. I want to ask how many of you traveled to Marrakesh for these meetings? Raise your hand. Those who traveled to Marrakesh. Okay, so we are going to see more hands in the air as we go through the second day and the third day. One thing I want to recognize is we have full house today. Thank you all very much for being with us. And thank you, Governor, thank you, Minister, for your contributions. This way? Merci, Roberto. Yes. Okay.
Tu es gentil.
Okay.
Oh, hi. Good. Great to see
So thanks, everybody. Now we welcome Mr. Fouzi Lekja, Mr. Delegate in charge of the budget, for some remarks.
you. Congratulations to you. You did a great job.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate,
Mr. Head of Government of Morocco, the IMF Managing Director, the Minister Delegate in charge of the budget, the Governor of Bank Al Maghrib. At the outset, I would like to express my happiness renewing to you our welcomes to Marrakesh. And this city is a city that is always welcoming people, as Marrakesh is the city of all of us. It is an international city, and those who step a foot on its land would feel that he is in his homeland. And we are all proud that the annual meetings are held here, and we will be proud of the decisions and the progress that would be achieved by the end of this week in dealing with the challenges. And we will remember this in the future, linked to the word Marrakesh, exactly as history remembers letters inscribed by Marrakesh in history 10 centuries ago, and had a great impact on the destiny of not just Morocco, but the destiny of all the surroundings of Morocco. And this drives me to give some moments to talk about Marrakesh as the topic suggested for this session. Morocco, a history of reform, is directly linked to the historical presence of Marrakesh as a headline for the development progress of Marrakesh and Morocco over history. When I say that there is an idea about the state, I mean to say that this idea emanates from our needs for today, as well as a rich heritage, because we have historical roots and we have a lot of deeply rooted institutions, and the historical path that Morocco was and will always be an effective, vivid element that influences others and is influenced by others, and no doubt it contributes to joint development of bright pages that set the domain of the Euro-Mediterranean horizon. We are not in a historical session, yet it might be useful to highlight some of the historical milestones as well as institutional developments that contributed to developing the Moroccan identity. These are considered to be the fundamentals, on the contrary of the changes that might be subject to reform. Marrakesh was established by Yusuf ibn Tashfin between Andalusia and the desert, and it was the link between the African and the Mediterranean parts of the world. And when we say today that current Morocco is working on being a bridge towards Africa, we say so because it has already played this role over centuries through trade and human exchange through Marrakesh. Marrakesh contributed to producing common historical aspects in this geographical domain. It connected Isbilia in Spain and the books in Marrakesh, and it's the same architect, Yaish al-Maliki, who built them both in the 12th century. When Ibn Rushd deceased in Marrakesh, his corpse was taken to be buried in Andalusia, and this has a great significance because it reflects the common heritage between the two banks of the Mediterranean Sea and the Iberian Peninsula and Morocco. We have strong common links, deeply rooted in history, and we have a common present and future. And our common organization for World Football Cup 2030 is reviving the links between us. Ladies and gentlemen, as people in the past were here in Morocco. Our presence here in Morocco again reflects the accelerated changes witnessed by Morocco over the past 25 years, especially since the beginning of the ruling of King Mohammed VI. May God support him. These changes are based on a comprehensive royal scheme that develops Morocco at different levels. It is inspired by our history and thinks of the future, and it's based on socio-economic development on a democratic basis, as none of this can be attained without the other. His Majesty the King led the gradual path of reform and development through an enlightened, wide vision over 2 decades, during which we have made a lot of building blocks in different fields and attained accumulation that enabled Morocco to enjoy strength and resilience that enabled it to face different crises, be it national or international, as well as continue building steadily in light of stability and openness. Our country, since the end of the last century, was able to put the basis of a development model that strikes a balance between reality and future vision, an example based on 3 main interlinked pillars, inculcating the democratic and institutional development of our country. Secondly, developing development strategies, linking the infrastructure to structural projects, as well as diversification of activities and modernizing them. Thirdly, building the human being through a vision for human sustainable development that covers social aspects as well as developing skills and the ability to be proactive, innovative, and generate wealth. All this goes hand in hand with securing spiritual safety as well as openness to the world in line with the national components and the Moroccan identity that has multiple aspects as well as open horizons. In the framework of this dynamism, we have reached the level of maturity to highlight milestones in the social field, the most important of which is the end of a specific concept for the social role played by the state and the beginning of a new concept within the framework of a strategic path that is part of the general development of the state. His Majesty the King, the creator of this strategy, is keen on following it up and its implementation, and he announced the launch of this big leap through launching a social system represented in streamlining social universal protection for all citizens for the first time in the history of Morocco. Ladies and gentlemen, these 2 parallel paths for economy and society would have never been able to achieve the goals if not based on a democratic, strong ground. Throughout this phase, we focused on the pillars of democratic transition represented in putting the end to the chapter of human rights violations through a pioneer experience in being just to victims and through also reconciliation that opened the floor for confidence in the new era, as well as the new concept for power and authority that turned the authorities and the power into new methods for supporting development. And today we're getting ready for the second development and the second amendment for the family contract to give more rights to Moroccan women. at the level of supporting stability in the time that has a lot of ideological instabilities. Morocco promulgated a spiritual method to put an end to religious extremism as well as violence, in addition to its pioneer contribution in fighting terrorism through an internationally acknowledged experience. All these levels showed that the strategy endorsed within the framework of this system led by the Majesty the King achieved its aspirations, as there has been a real transition in Morocco towards more pragmatic representation in the international world. And Morocco, as it was always, has been active in this sensitive region in the world, and it has enough capabilities to enable it to go on with its efforts for reconstruction, especially at this difficult moment faced by the Sahel and desert area, and also on both banks of the Mediterranean Sea. I would like to wrap up my speech by expressing thanks and appreciation to IMF and the World Bank and to all our financial partners who supported us through this path and provided the assistance. Thank you for your due listening.
Merci, Minister Legja. And now we're going to show a beautiful video on beautiful Morocco. Just enjoy. Thank you.
Welcome to Morocco, a land that is blessed by nature, a nation with a rich ethnic and cultural heritage. At the crossroads of three great civilizations, steeped in the radiance of Islam, so close to Europe, but also an African nation bearing the voice of its continent. Institutional continuity and sound leadership of the country's affairs have fostered progress and speeded development at the turn of the millennium, under the leadership of His Majesty King Mohammed VI. Over the past 2 decades, a series of reforms has propelled the Moroccan economy to a new phase of growth, driven by the diversification and strengthening of its productive fabric. Enhanced macroeconomic balances underpin a historic shift towards the implementation of ambitious sectoral strategies. The modernization of the agricultural sector as a driver of socio-economic development, and the development of global business lines through the creation of industrial platforms, offering cutting-edge solutions that are progressively carbon-free and export-driven. These industries serve roughly 100 markets through a number of free trade agreements. The deployment of world-class infrastructure throughout the kingdom has fostered its openness to trade, offering investors a wide range of opportunities in an economy that has emerged as one of the most competitive in the region. Through its proactive macroeconomic policies, Morocco has demonstrated remarkable resilience in coping with the crises that plague the global economy. Morocco can also rely on the continued support of its international financial partners as a result of far-reaching reforms that have consolidated the country's budgetary leeway. These reforms go hand in hand with the consolidation of the rule of law and institutions. As head of state and commander of the faithful, and guarantor of the country's independence and territorial integrity, His Majesty the King has been driving the country's momentum for reform for over 2 decades. As a constitutional, democratic, parliamentary, and social monarchy, the kingdom is continuously pursuing the process of strengthening the institutions of a modern state, underpinned by the principles of participation, pluralism, and good governance. Meanwhile, the Advanced Regionalization Project is serving as a powerful driver for equitable territorial development. is on the basis of a renewed social pact that Morocco looks to the future at the start of the 21st century. The reform of the family code and the status of women is at the heart of the challenges of modernizing society. This project, which has made significant progress over the past 20 years, is currently undergoing a new generation of reforms. Women's participation in the workforce, their emancipation, and their active involvement in all sectors of society are major objectives in line with the unreserved equality enshrined in the Constitution. As economic development cannot be achieved without equity, social justice has been at the forefront of the country's strategy since the launch of the National Initiative for Human Development. With its emphasis on practical measures to combat poverty and exclusion, the INDH program enhances the dignity of the most vulnerable citizens and fosters their contribution to the common good. In line with this vision, the Royal Impetus aims to promote an innovative and participatory approach, mobilizing all public and private players, civil society, and citizens for a renewed approach to development. Unlocking potential, correcting economic and social distortions, and promoting inclusion for all. This is the challenge we face in driving forward the path towards progress. The COVID-19 crisis underscored the importance of responsible management, positioning Morocco as a role model for its ability to protect its population through effective consensual measures. The crisis also accelerated the country's social protection program, now a national priority. Another key priority is the upgrading of the health and education sectors. On the one hand, to strengthen healthcare coverage throughout the country, and on the other hand, to pursue the modernization of the education system to achieve greater equity and more effective tracking of performance, and thus prepare for the skills required in the future. The experience of a Morocco that looks beyond models and builds on its strengths is the cornerstone of the ongoing cooperation with its neighbors. Through its investment in strengthening South-South cooperation, Morocco has made African integration an absolute priority in favor of a strong, united Africa. It advocates a multi-dimensional model of cooperation aimed at strengthening economic relations with its partners while forging solid institutional, cultural, and human ties. In an uncertain and volatile world, Morocco is charting a course of stability through active diplomacy, affirming the kingdom's position on the continental and global scenes. With its rich tradition of mediation, Morocco promotes development and global stability with the utmost respect of sovereignty of states and territorial integrity. It was during the recent World Cup in Qatar that Morocco's national colors shined most brightly in the eyes of the world, worn by a team that exemplified the values of courage, resilience, family respect, and solidarity that are the hallmarks of each and every Moroccan. But it was also in the face of hardship and mourning that the ability to mobilize efforts and the strength of the Moroccan nation proved their worth, through a massive mobilization of the country that earned international admiration. Bolstered by its proactive approach and the mobilization of financial instruments with its international institutional partners, Morocco has rolled out a full-scale Marshall Plan dedicated to the areas devastated by the earthquake. It is this united Morocco, sovereign and open to the world, proud of its heritage and committed to the future, which is today welcoming the world of finance to Marrakesh.
Okay, thanks a lot. So the next session is going to take place in just a couple of minutes. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the upcoming event will start in 5 minutes. Please take your seats and switch your phones to...
السيدات والسادة الحضور، الندوة القادمة ستبدأ في غضون 5 دقائق. نرجو منكم الالتزام بمقاعد.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next meeting will start in 5 minutes. We ask you to sit down and close your mobile phones or put them on air mode. Thank you.
السيدات والسادة الحضور، نرجو منكم.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the guests of the symposium.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage your moderator and distinguished panelists.
Could you please take a seat?
هل لكم أن تجلسوا في مقاعدكم؟ شكرا. يرجى الجلوس.
Pour qu'on puisse commencer la...
So that we may start the second session. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Hello, hello. It's not working anymore.
Assalamu alaikum.
Greetings and thank you. Please allow me once again, on my behalf and on behalf of the IMF work team, to thank the Moroccan authorities and the working group that participated for more than 3 years in the process of preparing the annual meetings for the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. I am Jihad Azhour, and I'm the Director of Middle East and Central Asia at the IMF, and we wanted that the opening of these meetings be specific to Morocco, and we were honored to listen during the first sitting to the speech made by the head of the government, which was very valuable. And during this sitting, we will delve into greater in-depth discussions regarding the look towards the future. What is the agenda for the future for Morocco, and how can we build a growth that is participatory in nature? Please allow me to speak in English now.
Thank you very much for hosting us. In this first round of discussion, we are going to explore the agenda for the future of Morocco, but also for the future of countries who are currently in the process of transforming their economies. And for that, I have the privilege to have 3 exceptional speakers from different backgrounds. The first one is Minister Ben Moussa. You all know he is not only an excellent academic, but also an excellent minister, and we were this morning with him visiting all the efforts that is being done to accelerate the reconstruction. The work is excellently done. I would like to congratulate you and the team of the Ministry of Education. I was impressed to see after 4 weeks that things are working and working well. But we are inviting you because also you were the one who put together, based on the decision of His Highness Le Roi Mohammed VI, a committee to think the future. And it was an inclusive, and also it was a deep exercise. We will get a bit your views on that. The second speaker comes from Europe, from a country who has done a lot in terms of reforms. 3 decades of transformation put Poland to be in the league of European countries in terms of performance and success. And excuse the pronunciation of the name, Your Excellency, Minister Reszkowska, Minister of Finance, and we will listen to the experience of Poland. The third speaker is a thought provoker. Professor Ricardo Hausman from Harvard University is someone who is not only teaching, researching, advising, but also thinking. And he focuses on issues from structural reforms to growth to many other issues. Therefore, our first round of discussion will be around a bit setting the stage. And I will start with you, Minister. You have been entrusted of the design of the nouveau modèle de développement. Vous avez mobilisé.
You have mobilized a team quite diversified, and you have made an effort that on the eve of COVID-19, and there was also a political transformation during that period. How could you describe your experience at the moment when His Majesty entrusted you with this most important mission? How did you succeed or manage to bring together divergent views? Could you please give us your feelings and tell us about your experience so that we may project ourselves in the future? A microphone, s'il vous plaît. Microphone, please.
Moi-même et les membres de la commission étions honorés.
Sorry, we still have a little technical issue.
Je voudrais dire combien les membres de la commission.
I'd like to say that members of the Commission and myself, we were honored by this mission given by His Majesty the King, but we were quite conscious about the challenges we had, because the order was not only to come up with a reform program, the request was to come up with a development model that would be a social project and see how we could implement it concretely, starting from an observation that we've made. The observation was that the growth rate was mild, 3% per year, whereas there is a great potential. And Morocco was going through difficulties in terms of social inequalities and territorial inequalities. So the process that has led to this project, we wanted this project to be resilient, and in order to do so, it needed to be co-built with all the living counterparts and players of the country. And we have met with all the political players at that time, with the opposition too. We have met with the economic leaders, with the unions, with the chambers of trade, and many other civil society players. We have been there in the field, across the country, in remote areas, in great cities, to listen to everyone and to collect, to listen to all the expectations that were being expressed. We also knew that if we wanted a resilient project, we needed to start from what we were, our reality, our identity, our institutions, and our strengths. That's how we could move forward. We were also quite aware of the fact that a resilient model does not only mean working on, let's say, economic and social dimensions, but it required a holistic effort. And that's how, in this report, we came up first with an ambition by 2050, with a prosperous Morocco, democratic Morocco, that provides well-being to the citizens. And this ambition was expressed, reflected in different axes, by the creation of value, by economic development, but not only. We also thought in terms of upgrading skills and competences, by increasing solidarity and inclusion, but also thinking about the territories, the sustainable development of the various territories of the country. And again, we have thought about other challenges we should think about in the future. So by 2035, we have thought about indicators that would reflect not only growth, but so many other related dimensions that I have just mentioned. What is important in this process is the how. Because Morocco has got lots of previous reports that would provide room for reforms, and often the difficulty was the actual implementation. And this is where the Commission and its efforts was to provide complementarity between the state that bears the mission, the state that provides this upgrading of skills and competences, but also a society that frees energy, where you can help better making of decisions. We were quite conscious that this complementary effort, just as what happened after the earthquake, where the action of the state was clear, robust under the leadership of His Majesty, but there were also lots of solidarity actions made by so many players. And this has brought about the change and transformation. So we think that transformation is at the core of this new process, of this complementarity. And we have focused on a series of action principles that we think are key if we want to succeed, such as the impact on the citizen, on the human development, a new approach using the collective value, an approach that is sustainable, that is able to upgrade again the capabilities of all players. And this can only be successful if it is enshrined in a framework of trust between players, with the strengthening of governance-related measures. So recommendations were made. This project can only be implemented thanks to the action and efforts of various players. You have the traditional players, the public sector, the private sector, obviously, but also PPPs. But not only. The third sector also, foundations, associations, businesses, they can all bring about value in terms of common well-being. They can participate in this building of trust in the future. So this development model, this ambition, is the how we are going to do things, but it is also about reforms, about recommendations on strategic policies, but also mechanisms that are going to support the management of change. And this is the model that is going to be the natural reference, the standard for the government, but also for political players, without it being a very detailed program, because of course there is a democratic process in the country, so we have to take this into account.
Questions that I will follow up with you. Thank you very much. Especially on the enablers and how we, in this exercise, we can assess where the weaknesses are. But let me go and compare another experience, which is one of the most successful, I may say, in the last 3 decades in Europe. Poland did, over the 3 decades, a series of reforms. Mr. Minister, what are the main lessons that you think one can draw from the case of Poland, where if you are consulted by another colleague, what would you say are the things to do and also the things not to do or to avoid doing?
Thank you very much for inviting me here, and let me take the occasion and congratulate Morocco on the excellent organization of this really very, very important event. And I feel sorry about the recent earthquake, and I hope for the strength and the resilience of those affected. And thank you for inviting me here and giving me an opportunity to talk a bit about Poland and about the history, which of course has an impact for the future and for the growth of the country. Poland is in a transformation for over 30 years, and this process was of course full of ups and downs and reform fatigues and also unexpected obstacles. But it is very important to say that over 30 years ago, Poland was a poor and peripheral country in the Eastern Europe. And after 30 years, it has become one of the examples of the world's growth champion and success of global success, one of the success stories for the global economy. And surprisingly, this was due to the communist social egalitarianism that allowed for building democracy, for building inclusive society, and for building prosperous country. Because, in my opinion, the inclusive societies, this is the key for the growth. And at the end of the communism, in 1989, Poland was really in a dreadful situation. It was a bankrupt country with the burdened industry, inefficient, economically destructive, and with hyperinflation. And after 30 years, a global growth champion. And from 1992, with constant growth. Even in the global crisis, 2008, 2009, we were the only country in the European Union to avoid recession. So this is really a success story. And how was it possible, and what are the main lessons? So first of all, I think very important is to have the political will and the elites which know where they are going, what are the goals, despite the fact that the decisions which are taken at the moment, they will have their effects, positive effects in the longer term. We might say that someone sows and someone else reaps the political benefits. And sometimes you need to pay a price, a political price, but you need to see the goal and the gain for the society, the gain for the economy, and the gain for the state. The second lesson is that really deep market reforms were necessary, and they were introduced in Poland. Of course, we could do better because there were some difficult points in those reforms, but these reforms, they put foundations to the future growth. The third one, it is the mix of policies. You need to have the proper mix of economic policy, of development policy, focused on accumulation and proper allocation of capital. And the next thing is institutions. And institutions, they really matter. You need strong institutions like democracy, you need free market, you need open economy, you need open free competition. This all really matters, and this needs to be supported by the culture, by the proper culture. But in the case of, I think, every reform, what is really, really important is that you need to have an anchor for the reform. And in case of Poland and of our reforms from the 90s and 2000s, it was the EU accession. We saw the goal of being a part of the European Union, and World Banks put it once that European Union is a convergence machine, that it takes poor countries and makes them rich. And without the EU perspective, without the EU reforms for Poland, it would be much more difficult to build strong institutions and to change culture. And this was the return to Europe. This was a really strong motivator for the politicians, for the elites, but also for the society to survive to understand the reforms. Sometimes it was very hard, but the motivator, the strong motivation was there. So this is really the main lessons learned, and I think what you need the egalitarian, inclusive society, you need strong institutions, you need strong policymakers, you need anchor for the reform, but you also need a lot of luck. And don't forget, this is very, very important, don't forget about the most vulnerables, because the growth needs to be inclusive. And reforms, you need, in frame of the reform, you need to have the prevention mechanisms developed, not to be too deep, not to sacrifice the most vulnerable ones.
Thank you very much. Again, I have certain
مرة أخرى
how an anchor like accessing Europe was easy to convey to the population, and the political economy of such transformation in a cycle that with democracy becomes very short. But I'll come back to that. Let me maybe now move to Professor Hausman. Ricardo, you have worked in different geographies from Latin America to Middle East, Asia, and you have written, taught about those issues for decades. Now you are here in Morocco at those annual meetings where many issues have successively affected us over the last few years. What you would say about succeeding in big transformative reforms?
Well, first of all, Jihad, thank you very much for this invitation, and thanks to Roberto Cardarelli for writing this book and for also including me. This is a great honor to be back in Morocco. I was here some 15 years ago, and I was able to see many of these bets, c'est Paris, that were just bets at the time, to see them materialize. Tanger Med, the aerospace, the car industry, the tourism plans, and so on. So I'm super happy to be back and to reflect on lessons for the world from Morocco that I think some of them are in the book, some of them are not sufficiently emphasized in the book. So I'm going to try to extract some lessons for the world from this. But let me start by saying that the world is quite frustrated with this issue of growth, because we thought we knew the secret. The secret is that we had to improve health. We had to have families with fewer children so we could invest more in the education of the children. So with fewer children, more educated, in school, women would have more of a chance to participate in the economy, so higher female labor force participation in more urbanized settings. And so this combination of education, health, demographic transition, urbanization was going to facilitate the absorption of technology, growth, and so on. Well, guess what? Since 1990, 90% of the countries have narrowed significantly the life expectancy gaps, say with the US or the advanced world. 90+% of countries have narrowed the education gap. 90% of countries have narrowed the urbanization gap. 80% of countries have narrowed the female labor force participation gap. But only 40-some% of countries have narrowed the income gap. The medium country has not narrowed the income gap, in spite of narrowing dramatically all these other gaps. So this poses a question of how come? How come we do all these major transformations and we don't get to narrow the income gap? That's in part, let me say, because technological gaps have been widening in the majority of countries. You would say, how could technological gaps be widening if education gaps are narrowing? So I've been thinking a lot about these things, and I want to say that all these things that people mention macro stability, structural reforms, health, education, etc., female labor force participation, they're all in principle good. Some of them are intrinsically good, but they may not necessarily constitute a growth strategy. And to explain that, I want to make the following distinction. I think that all of these good things are complements. They are not substitutes. Complements are things like coffee and sugar. Substitutes are things like coffee and tea. Well, you know, if you like to drink your coffee sweet, no, you're going to either run out of coffee or you're going to run out of sugar. If things were substitutes, you run out of coffee no matter you drink tea. But if there are complements, you tend to run out of some before you run out of others. And the one you run out of first becomes your binding constraint. And if you don't have coffee, you know, giving more sugar is not going to solve the problem. So these different areas of policy are complements. And because of that, you run out of some before you run out of others. As a consequence, this has very important implications for what constitutes a growth strategy. I think in Latin America, my own country, Venezuela, and Argentina are scientific proof that bad macro can destroy a country. But I think that Chile and Peru constitute scientific proof that good macro is not a growth strategy, that you can have the good macro and not grow, not narrow gaps. So I would say if macro is not your binding constraint, more macro is like giving more sugar when you don't have coffee. I would say the same thing about education. Education, I'm in the education business, so I'm not going to talk evil about education, but the question is education the binding constraint? Maybe not. Maybe you will educate more people, but if the economy is not solving other problems that can absorb people, your educated people might leave, they might be driving Uber, and you may not be extracting the full value of their education. And that, I would say, is the typical performance of most countries in the world right now. They've narrowed dramatically their education gaps, but they have not narrowed their income gaps. I would say the same thing about health. I would say the same thing about female labor force participation. They are not silver bullets. They will have a big impact on growth if they are the binding constraint. If they're not the binding constraint, they may not have the impact you're hoping. So you cannot add some improvement in health to some improvement in education to some improvement there, and you add them all up and say this is how much the economy will be growing. They don't add up that way. If you move the binding constraint, you'll see action. So as a consequence, I would say another fact. Some people say, do we want export-led growth? Do we not want export-led growth? What alternatives are there to export-led growth? In the studies I've done, let me put it very bluntly, all sustained exports, all sustained growth are export-led. There is no such thing as non-export-led growth, in the sense that on average, when a country grows at 1, exports grow at 1.4. Sustained growth, you have exports growing faster than GDP. So all exports is always, all growth is always export-led. Sustained growth is always export-led, and not just export-led, it's export-led in a transformation of your export package towards greater diversity and towards more complexity in the things you export. In the study I've done, essentially, 40% of countries narrowed their income gap. Only 20% of countries narrowed the gap significantly. Morocco narrowed the gap. It was 10% of US GDP in 1990. It's now 13% of US GDP. Still, the gap is huge, right? But sort of narrowing. It's in the second quintile of growth experiences in this period, Morocco, okay? Those countries transformed their export basket. They diversified towards more complex products. That is central to a growth strategy. But diversification is full of market failures because it faces a bunch of chicken and egg problems. If you're going to diversify, it means that we're going to start making things you were not making before. But to make things, you have to know how to make them. But you typically don't know how to make the things you don't do. So how do you start making the things you don't do if to make them you have to know how to make them, but you don't know how to make the things you don't do? You need watches, you need watchmakers to make watches, but why are you going to have watchmakers in a country that doesn't make watches? And how do you become a watchmaker if the country is not making watches? So how do you diversify? These things markets are not good at, and just freeing markets is not going to be enough. You will have to have something that I noticed was not mentioned, I would say, at all in the book, and that is that you need industrial policies. You need sector policies. It was even in the video. That you need tourism policy, you need agricultural policy, you need, you need aerospace policy, you need policies you need séparer, these bets, to facilitate the transformation process. And that's why we see in the Moroccan export basket the growth of tourism in new areas, in new destinations, the whole industrial structure that developed around Tanger Med. You see the movement towards new things. For example, right now, the world is sending the message that there is global warming, climate change, and that every country should focus on how they're going to lower their own emissions, right? That's a conversation, and we will help you lower your own emissions. But if you are in a country like Morocco that has so much sun and so much wind, why should the focus be on helping Morocco lower its emissions? The ambition is, what can Morocco do to help the world lower its emissions? The world is currently emitting a lot because the world is using ammonia as fertilizer, and that ammonia is gray and emits a lot of CO2. So if the world is going to lower its emission, the world is going to need green ammonia, and OCP is going to provide them with a green ammonia so that the world lowers its emissions, not Morocco. If Morocco stops its emissions, the world is not going to notice. But the world is going to notice if Morocco helps them, mobilizing its sun and wind resources to help the world lower its emissions. And that, by the way, let me say, is also, I mentioned industrial policy, which is a four-letter word. OCP is a state-owned enterprise, which is also kind of like a four-letter word. If you take an IMF report, it will say, if you search for state-owned enterprise, very, very near, you'll find the word privatization, right? Because it's sort of like, state-owned, private, no. State-owned enterprises can play a strategic role in diversification, and I think that it has played that role in Morocco, and I want to rescue that experience from Morocco to the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ricardo, I have many questions to you, but two observations. The question of industrial policy is something that we are internally reflecting on, seriously, but we are reflecting on it. We're a bit worried that is an issue that could be considered or used as a way to develop policies that will limit trade and be a bit on the protectionism than more on designing the future. My second observation, you are sitting near someone who come from a country where industrial policy destroyed growth in the past. It's very interesting to see what you're saying, and this brings me to my second round of questions, is how you make it happen. And this is an issue where it's not only for good economists or strategists, it's also for those who are going to implement. And this is where we hit the wall of political economy. This is where the big issues you need to address a situation where you have winners and losers. How you do this? You hit a situation where you have majorities that could be, in fact, losing elections because of those transformative reforms. Again, let me go back to you. How you did in Poland survive 3 decades of reforms without facing those kind of issues. Or maybe you have faced them, but what are the lessons that you have learned from this experience?
Okay, of course, it's not that during the transformation and during the reforms there was a stable political situation. The governments changed many times because, as I said, it is that you need to take sometimes very difficult decisions. Sometimes there is a cost, a political cost, but the main issue was that we saw the ultimate goal, and the ultimate goal was to catch up the West, to become a European Union member, and we had a framework, a very strong framework for the reforms, which was given by the European Commission for the states which were in the accession process and which need to come through transformation, to introduce very strong, very efficient institutional reforms, to fight the corruption, to introduce transparent measures in the administration, to build a culture which was the culture accepted by the European Union and the culture which gave the businesses a very very transparent business environment to grow with their business activities, and so this EU reform, the EU anchor, reform anchor, this was really a strong incentive for Poland. Of course, it didn't mean that all the people all the time they were very happy because we were going towards the European Union. At the beginning of the reforms, we had a very deep market reform and also very deep reforms because of the hyperinflation. And we could do more about the vulnerable people in this time, because we a bit and the governments they sacrificed them on the way, and this was the role for the next governments to think about the social programs, to think about those most affected, and about the inclusive growth, to make the growth really inclusive. But the deep market reforms, they had a very important impact on the businesses and on their activities, because we entered a single market, and EU and the single market gives a lot of opportunities. That's one thing. And the free competition, the open market, this allowed for the Polish companies to build really strong businesses. And nowadays we can see the examples of the businesses which started in the 90s, in the early 2000s, which are now the biggest world's exporters, like furniture, like doors and PVC windows. Like the very famous games, The Witcher and Cyberpunk. These are the Polish products and the benchmark, let's say, for Poland. We are also one of the leaders in the spare parts for automotive sector, for the lithium batteries, the first one in Europe. And because we have managed to build a very friendly business environment with a lot of tax incentives supporting the investments, we are also a very attractive country for foreign investors. The FDI grows, the amounts grows every year from like 5% year to year. So Poland has become a hub also for the hubs, a place for the hubs, like for R&D, for innovation, for services in fintech, in ICT. And this is due to the reforms we have carried for those 3 decades, because these were the investments in the infrastructure, in the human development, so the education, the quantity and quality of education was very important. And now we can harvest, let's say, because we have a very, very skilled labor force in Poland. And also in the recent years, the focus on digitalization, on the innovation and support also of the government for those processes. But I think that the big challenge nowadays is the accessibility of the capital, and it is the challenge for the whole Europe. So there is something to be done there, and this is very important also to have strong institutions. I said already about the democracy, open markets, everything, but also the government. The government needs to build a trust with the traders, with the entrepreneurs, but also with citizens. And when you introduce new reforms, you really need to seek for a broader support for the reform and to define the goal clearly and to explain and try to build a coalition around the idea. This is really, a dialogue is very important, but also to create a good environment. And in Poland, it is also, when we are talking about the inclusive growth about the most vulnerables, you need to have also social policies. Of course, the sound finances are really a key here to afford to realize your goals and also not to lose the social part. And what we did in Poland was a very successful reform of the tax system. It was the organizational reform, legal reform, but also digitalization, which helped a lot with the ceiling of tax system, but also increasing compliance. And we have doubled or more than doubled our tax incomes in the course of the last seven years. So this is really what is important, to have a clearly defined goal, to be decisive. Of course, it will cost sometimes. A political cost will be there, but you need a mature politicians, but you also need a mature society, and this could be done by education, by the democratic processes, which will help and the strong anchors for your reforms.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Let me now also thank you very much. When thinking about sequencing and implementation, turn to you, Minister. You have identified an important set of reforms. You have delivered in the past, as Ricardo mentioned, the delivery on les paris de l'avenir 15 years ago. Where do you see the sequencing of all these important reforms? This is my first question. And my second related questions, do you see gaps? Have you identified certain number of gaps, especially on the enablers, access to finance, access to talent, access to market? And what have you learned from your experience and experience of others in order to engage in a journey like this? And what is the ideal sequencing of all these reforms?
Je voudrais revenir.
I would like to come back on what Ricardo said about the significance of having a holistic approach whereby reforms are not sequential but are a part of an approach that deals simultaneously with different dimensions. Our conviction at the Commission was that we could not achieve our ambitions if we tackled the subjects in a sequential way. Our conviction was also that some reforms had necessarily more impact. Some reforms were mature to be launched immediately. Others required more exchange and debate before being politically implemented. These were reforms that involve winners and losers, and we need to manage to strike a balance to go forward. We were also aware that the capacity of implementation which is not necessarily and only financial, but also institutional, is a real challenge. Based on this, we identified a certain number of subjects on which we had to work, and we regrouped them in 3 axes. An axe relating to the economy and creation of value. And when we talk about value creation, I may link this with what was said about the industrial policy, the need today to diversify, to exert more effort in terms of investment, and these investments need to be connected to the objectives that are part of our development model. The need also to improve upon our competitiveness in a world where the carbon component is significant. Hence, all the work to be done on low price energy and carbon that needs to be implemented as a factor of competitiveness of our economy. And third axis, still related to the economy, we need to pay attention to solidarity and to the social aspect, especially here in Morocco, where we have social realities. We don't have only major businesses. We need to work on employment. And the second major field relates to those human-centered efforts, inclusion of women, of the youth. These subjects need to go hand in hand with the major economic issues and need to mobilize efforts and the energy of players. And finally, a third field that can be summed up in a governance approach, how to mobilize territories and how to create the conditions for this sustainable development in a country like Morocco. This has major significance for the population when we talk about water scarcity, for example. This makes sense because you immediately link this to food security. And so working on these dimensions, the digital realm, reform of justice, all these projects and fields that need to be opened up urgently and simultaneously. And this also leads me to another important point. We need to create a consensus on the objective to be reached, and this would justify all the efforts of reform. For these subjects, we need to create a micro consensus to be able to find the right path to reach these reforms. And this is the situation, for example, in the sector that I have the honor to preside over, the education sector. We conducted many efforts based on a roadmap in consultation with all other players, pupils, parents, and other stakeholders to refine our change path and make sure that it becomes a reality while paying attention to the impact and to the way we may mobilize teachers for such exercise. We need, of course, to improve their working conditions, their training, but also their material or financial situation in a structural approach that can be considered more as an investment than a mere increase of an operational budget. A complementary question: how can we steer all this? Do you see it as a centralized effort, state-led or not? Implementing by objectives or through a more detailed formulation? The approach that we prefer is a follow-up mechanism, which is a societal project that involves all actors, the government, the civil society, economic operators. The convergence of all these players is an important subject, and also with assessment stages to see what is working and what is not. And His Majesty the King has entrusted this follow-up mission of the implementation of this reference framework to the High Commissioner for Planning, and the implementation of this structure that is underway has allowed us to create these conditions of convergence geared towards the objective with a clear implementation capacity. And here I would like to talk about the macroeconomic framework, which is not an and per se, but also a lever and a framework that allows us to accompany and achieve this ambition. Of course, we need to mobilize internal resources, external resources, international resources, and diversify all these resources, and also accept that there can be some imbalances when achieving this transformation towards more growth and more inclusive growth with delivery capacity, proven delivery capacity. And this is also the opportunity to stress the importance of assistance by international organizations like the IMF and the World Bank, of high significance to accompany this dynamic and to contribute to the success of such dynamic. Now, the third aspect, which is the role of the private sector, a very important partner indeed, and we will also come back on the industrial policy that Ricardo mentioned earlier. But before we go to this third part, Ricardo, let's talk about the region. You have accompanied several countries in their transformation projects. You have touched very closely different experiences. Some were successes and others not. Are there any elements that differentiate regions when it comes to achieving such a transformation process?
Is very hard to achieve anywhere in Middle East, North Africa, and elsewhere in the world is a cooperative relationship between government and the private sector. There is enormous complementarities between what the private sector can do and what the private sector needs from the government. There are markets for cars, and you can have a market for car and freedom of car, pricing, etc. But no one wants to buy a car if there are no roads, if there are no traffic signs, if there are no traffic lights, if there are no traffic rules, if there are no traffic cops. Every industry lives in a space of public goods. Now it's very hard to sell an electric vehicle because people wonder, if I run out of battery, where am I going to charge the car? And nobody wants to put charging stations because nobody owns an electric car. So you have these chicken and egg problems everywhere, and you have to have a framework where there is enough communication between a private sector that sees opportunities, a private sector that suffers obstacles, and a government that is able to adjust its policies, its infrastructure, its rules to facilitate the exploitation of those opportunities. And that's very hard to achieve. There's, in some countries, there's big distrust of the private sector. There are some parts of government that want to keep control of parts of the economy. In other parts, there's just inability to put society to deal with its issues. You come from Lebanon. We understand that it's been 4 years, an inability to address a major crisis to get yourself together. So I would emphasize the fact that Morocco has a vision of where it wants to go that can facilitate the coordination of reforms in many areas. It's predicated on a relatively healthy political process that is in general, relatively hard to achieve.
Thank you very much. Let me move to the third set of issues, the role of the private sector. Minister Jaskowska, how a country who has been in a centralized communist regime for more than 5-6 decades was able to transform very quickly in a vibrant private sector-led economy? Is it a DNA shift or something that has been done that you would like to share with us?
Yes, thank you. I think that we have, despite the communist centralized system we had, and Poles, they had in their DNA this entrepreneurship gene. So at the very beginning, when the Polish market became an open one, and we had these reforms, really there was a boom of the private initiatives, private businesses. And this boom really continues. And in Poland, the majority of the businesses, and our economy is based mostly on the small and medium enterprises. And what was necessary, of course, was to build a business-friendly environment. And it is not the job which has been done and it's over, because it's usually on the way, the governments, they tend to be over-bureaucratic and to over-regulate the environment for the businesses. So the constant dialogue is very, very important. What you said, this is the dialogue, the conversation, the contact which allows to understand what are the needs, what are the obstacles, and what can be done from the government side. What we needed to do, we need to build the whole infrastructure for businesses, for investments, and to understand that this is really necessary to allow businesses to grow, and so the infrastructure, the investment in the human development, so the education, which is really important. And you need to do this with the businesses, because you need to know if you really need these watchmakers or you need a highly skilled professionals on the ICT sector or others, and what is the industry direction, and also the diversification of the economy. And in Poland, it really did happen, because we have also, we have the industry, but we have a lot of, as I said, small and medium enterprises. We have a lot of services, hubs for very innovative services for the global companies. And this diversification and also the strong macroeconomic fundamentals and the let's say the flexibility of the businesses, it really helped us to survive the recent crises. Not only the COVID-19, of course, with the support, with the transfers from the state to keep the companies going, not to have the increase of unemployment, but also during the war, which is at our borders. It's really this flexibility, this competitiveness of Polish companies is really something which helps to survive these really difficult times. But this all was a process of transformation, of building a trust between government, institutions, and businesses, of building the business-friendly environment. And as I said, this process is not over yet. And a lot is to be done, because we are living not only in Poland with the Polish regulator, we also live in the European Union with the EU regulator. And there is a voice, very strong voice in EU, but also in Poland, for the simpler regulation, for creating more competitive environment, because we have all the trends in the global economy, like fragmentation, like the protectionism and others, and there is a discussion, but we need really to make our businesses, to make the environment more competitive for businesses, and the economies will grow.
Thank you very much. Ricardo, let me move fast. The IP issue, the industrial policy issue, those shifts in policies. Do you see this as justified, giving the circumstances of, I would say,
Unfortunately, we can't hear the speaker. The sound is interrupted.
slowing down, and how you differentiate between the two, and how we as economists.
We can't hear the speaker properly. There is a staccato in output.
A government is several thousand agencies and several million pages of legislation. So you're managing thousands of agencies and millions of pages of legislation. Nobody has read the million pages of legislation. And nobody knows what all the thousands of government agencies are doing. So you need a system to figure out where you need to edit the million pages of legislation and where you need to reorganize or reorder your thousands of government agencies. And you're going to do it with some kind of goal or purpose, some kind of problem-solving capacity. And in my mind, those problems do not exist at the horizontal level only. There are many problems that are vertical, that are industry-specific. And you have to be able to have conversations at the right level of specificity. Some issues are quite horizontal. Ideally, you want to find problems that are horizontal. And if you solve them, you solve the problem for many industries. But some problems are vertical. And if you want to have your agricultural sector export, you will have to solve sanitary and phytosanitary problems, certifications, market access, etc. And you'll have to do it for that industry. There is one thing, when things work, you don't know why they work. And when things don't work, you don't know why they don't work. I don't know why Poland works, okay? But let me put you a couple of hypotheses, okay? The first one is that it was artificially separated from the rest of Europe, and suddenly you realize that Poland is incredibly close to Germany. And as a consequence, you have this labor force that used to have a much lower wage rate than German wage rates. The moment you allow investment and trade to happen, many companies moved east to establish in Poland. And by the way, they moved more to Western Poland than to Eastern Poland. Okay? So proximity to markets, etc., is definitely a good thing. And the European Union opened those markets. But the European Union did something else too, that it took away the power of Poland to prevent Germans or Belgians or Italians or whoever to work in Poland. That means that if there were skills shortages in Poland, it doesn't matter because you could mobilize skills from anywhere in the continent and send them to Poland. In most developing countries, including, for example, in this region, immigration policies are incredibly restrictive. In Jordan, you have to be a citizen to be a doctor. You have to be a citizen to be an engineer. So if you have some skills shortage, you cannot solve it by just bringing talent from abroad. Immigration policy, in my mind, is probably the cheapest development strategy, development reform that you could do. It generates money, it doesn't cost any money, and it's horizontal. But not all solutions are horizontal. You have to have a government that has the capacity to do the horizontal when there are opportunities and doing the vertical when there are opportunities. And that vertical is what I want to call industrial policy. I don't want to call industrial policy a set of subsidies, a set of protections. That's not the goal. In my mind, industrial policy should be defined by its goal. And its goal has to be diversification in the direction of greater complexity. That's its goal. Its instruments are going to be opportunistic. They're going to be about solving the need for public goods, the need for solving chicken and egg problems in the appearance of the new. And I think that that's how I think of industrial policy. And in that sense, governments have always done it, but they're always there, but everything that can be done should be done better. And there's many ways in which this thing can be improved.
Thank you very much. We are out of time, but I would like to give the last word for you, Minister Ben Moussa, to conclude the session.
Juste un mot pour souligner.
Just a word to stress how important is the assistance by international organizations like the IMF and the World Bank. This assistance and coaching of this transformation process. The needs for finance are extremely important. Given all the stakes and challenges we have mentioned, we have existing solutions, but we also need innovative solutions. How do we create convergence between all stakeholders and players so that they may accompany the choices and the objectives and ambition of each country? How a continent like Africa, with its own realities and its own stakes, there are adaptations that need to be clear when it comes to the objective, but also as to the path to go forward to that transformation. Thank you. This is very interesting. We are going to shift now to the next session, which will be moderated by, and the moderator is appearing on the stage.
Hello? Hello, hello? Oui. So thanks a lot. There's going to be a video, and then session 3 chaired by His Excellency Minister Jazuli and moderated by Dr. Gaffi. So wait a few seconds for session 3 of this event. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the upcoming event will start in 5 minutes. Please take your seats and switch your phones to silent mode.
السيدات والسادة الحضور.
Ladies and gentlemen, the next session will start in about 5 minutes. We ask you to sit in your seats and also to silence your mobile phones.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage your moderator and distinguished panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage your moderator and distinguished panelists.